Welcome to the Put On Waivers Media Group, home of the Put On Raiders podcast and the Student Body Right podcast. This is your place for the best breakdowns and the best insight for those who fight on and bleed silver and black. Now, here are your hosts, Dwayne Douglas and Ryan Holmes.
Hey, welcome everybody to the glorious episode of the Student Body Right USC podcast. I'm your host, Dwayne Douglas, and I am podcasting on the beautiful shores of the Pacific Ocean. Beautiful day out here in Southern California. PORSBR is my new Twitter handle. So PORSBR is my new Twitter handle. I am joined by Evan Desai here, one of the writers for USC. We had so much to talk about with this team. They're playing really well, really good football. I know people want to kind of talk about the holes, but they're not a complete unit. But we know that. We knew that going into the season. No, very few teams. Maybe Georgia is probably the only team that's a complete unit. But USC is right now can pretty much hang with anybody right now. And I want to start off with the words of Tim Brando is doing, longtime announcer, is doing a game where Ohio State is playing Toledo. So in essence, we know that's a get the check game. We know about that. And then he goes on and talking about how they ask about because the USC game against Fresno is next. And Evan, he says USC's overrated. Fresno's gonna give them all they can handle. All this stuff like that. Just kind of ripping in taking a chance to rip in the USC. What are your thoughts when you heard that comment?
Man, I wish I could say I was surprised, honestly. You know, that's kind of how it goes when it comes to a lot of these, broadcasters, analysts, a lot of college football fans in general. You know, they don't like to see USC up like this. They really don't. And, when the death penalty hit, they all laughed at USC. If it was their program or if it was one of the beloved programs down south, it would be a huge story. The penalty would have never happened, blah, blah. And, when it was USC, that's just what it was. And people want to continue to see USC down. Now that they're kind of making moves like this, even in an Ohio State game where they're beating Toledo by 77, apparently beating Stanford and putting up over 40 against them isn't good enough, So, I thought it was very random. He kind of showed his true colors, just kind of taking that random shot. He kind of showed his own bias,
Yeah, and also too, a guy like Kirk Herbstreit, who is not one of my favorites anyway, but he makes sure everybody knows, right, that whether it's Caleb Williams, whether it's Mario Williams, whether it's Jordan Addison, that those guys are like almost like bought and paid for players. That I think one of the veteran Trojans made a play. He's like, oh, he's a real Trojan because he was. I mean, it's really unbelievable that they don't want. I mean, these kids could go to war tomorrow. They could all walk off the field and go to war tomorrow. But God forbid their likeness, they ever make any money off of their likeness while they're in college. God forbid.
Yeah, it's just not surprising. It's there's college football is such like almost like tribal sport in the sense that so much of the following is just so like attached to the tradition that they're ignoring ways to actually make the game better. And when the game is getting made better and we're actually making the players who produce this product for us get compensated and get what they deserve and have the best possible experience, it's a problem. And, I don't really like that. People will say, well, I don't like where the game's going. Well, I don't like you telling young kids what they can and can't do about what school they can go to,
exactly.
When kids can go to whatever school, what money they can make, other kids can make other money. And again, some of the non-revenue sport athletes are able to make money, not when they're playing professionally in the Olympics or whatever. I don't know what it is about football, but there's just that certain group that just continues to talk about it. They don't like where it's going, even though it's going in a significantly better direction than it ever was.
Yeah, I mean, and I just don't get. I don't know if it's jealousy or what the deal is, but it doesn't make any sense why they're doing that. But it's not going backwards; it's only going to go forward. So you get used to it and deal with it. And like these kids should be no more backyard deals, no more under the table. Like let's just be out in front, and then let's just have everything out in the open and have it work for everybody. Like I mean, whether it's United Airlines, whether it's Beats, just like it doesn't. Again. They could go to war tomorrow and die for their country, but God forbid tennis players when it's Serena start cashing checks. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, come on, let's be real. But let's go on the field here. I kind of like the fact that Caleb came back a little bit back to the pack and struggled a little bit in this game, and the drives were like not easy. I thought that when you play a team like Fresno State, it's like, you know, they got NFL talent on that team. Like the players who were going to get drafted off that team, but he was able to kind of shake off the rust a little bit and then come through and, you know, have some really quality drives. And when they get in the red zone, it's just deadly. I mean, if you can't stop them before they get to the red zone, it's just forget about it. They're going to score a touchdown every time.
No question. The thing I liked about it was they were going for those fourth downs too, and they were getting it done, you know, whether that was in the red zone or whether that was anywhere on the field. You know, they were aggressive, they were confident, they were in rhythm, you know, and that's exactly what Lincoln Riley wants. So even when they're forcing third downs, which they didn't see the first 2 weeks, and even when they're forcing fourth downs, which they didn't see the first 2 weeks, you know, USC still looked very confident when they went up there. You had Caleb running the show. They had so many weapons they could get the ball to. So many weapons they're getting the ball to in all different kinds of spots. It's just a really unpredictable offense, you know, and you know, like you mentioned, you know, Fresno State's got dudes. Like, this was a test. I know that Fresno State's not the best team, but they're one of the better group of 5 teams in the country. Yeah. This was a test, and USC passed it.
Yeah, and I would say this too. Like, it's funny because like when they got Jordan Addison, I said to myself, maybe it's overkill. Like, maybe it's too much. I don't think that they would be nearly as good if they didn't have this guy. Like, I mean, the spin move against Brandon Lux, who's going to be an NFL corner. The guy can absolutely go out there and play, but he is just so silky smooth. He reminds me. I mean, like, I know people talk about Calvin Ridley, who was his favorite player, but he has a little bit of Marvin Harrison too. Like, he really is just a kind of a complete wide receiver, and it's like when Jordan Addison and Caleb Williams have been playing for a decade.
Oh, no question. I mean, there's a difference between having a lot of good receivers, which USC already had before Addison, but there's a difference between that and then having someone you can run an offense through, you know. Like, Jordan Addison's a guy who's capable of you just funneling your offense through him and you winning that way. Now, couple that with a group that was already pretty good, a stable wide receivers that was already one of the better ones in the country, if not one of the best ones in the country. And, you know, you just have a really deadly attack that can beat you in so many different ways, because a guy like Addison, he can run so many different routes.
Yeah, he's been phenomenal. And I think that one of the things that I always will like about Lincoln Riley is the fact that yes, he can pass the football. Yes, everybody wants to pass the football, but he, at his core, those guards are going to pull. He wants to smash that. He wants to, you know, go heavy personnel at times and run the football right at you. And look at what Travis Dye and Austin Davis did in this ball game. They just really smashed the hell out of Fresno State in that game. And shout out to Travis Dye for having that, Marshawn Lynch run for a touchdown late in that game.
Oh, yeah. And the best part about like that run was, you know, he took a shot to the sack just a couple of plays before, if you remember that.
Yes, he did.
He comes back in, he goes 25 yards, he breaks 5 tackles in that 25-yard run. I mean, he's electric. And, you know, you mentioned, you know, some of the other backs like Austin Jones, for instance, you know, he had that touchdown with his helmet off. You know, They ripped his helmet off. They couldn't defend him. They rip his helmet off. He runs to the end zone and he scores. And then they call it back. But then he's a dude. So he takes the ball the next play and he scores again, you know. And we even got Darwin Barlow involved in there for a couple of carries. And he had 18 yards, you know. So I know it was, you know, only a couple of carries, but for what it's worth, those carries went really well. And even when Malik Brown got the ball the one time, it was on a pass, but he was efficient there too. His 8-yard pickup, he looked fast, he looked shifty, he looked like his normal self. You know, like there's just so many guys, like you mentioned, it's not just the passing game, but I mean, USC's run more than they pass this year. And, you know, that should always be how it is in this type of offense. You know, there's some air raid concepts in the offense, but I do kind of pause a little bit when people say it's an air raid, because while there are some passing concepts and even timing concepts that are air raid like in this offense, and it comes from that tree, it's branched off to its own thing and to Lincoln Riley's own philosophy so much that where it's really effective running the ball as well, obviously.
No question about it. We're here with Evan Desai of Reign of Troy. He writes for them, so check him out. His Twitter handle is Evan K Desai, DESAI, if you will, for checking out his stuff. There was a Cortland Ford is hurt, but also, you know, Bobby Haskins is there from left tackle, and I think that we found out a little bit how important he is to this offense during that little stretch in the second quarter. Where, you know, they got some pressure on Caleb Williams. It sounds like he's okay, and if the game was close, he could have went back into the game. But any concern about Ford and Haskins?
Not particularly. I think that, like, for instance, like with Haskins, he ended up coming back into the game. Then, of course, he ended up coming back out. But it goes to show that I think it might not be too serious if he wasn't taken out originally. And then it wasn't, he wasn't carted off, no stretcher, nothing like that on the second injury. I'm willing to hope that it is just kind of minor. And, we look at Cortland Ford, he obviously dressed, he was there. So I do think that if the game was to the point where they needed Cortland Ford to go in, he would have. Obviously, there was a play when Mason Murphy comes in and he kind of, I forgot who it was, but he kind of just ran right through him. He didn't really block him like at all, really. So that was
didn't touch him.
Pretty bad. But even then, like, I wouldn't necessarily count on that being the case every single play. It's his first time really getting that kind of meaningful action, and so kind of put in a tough spot. So yeah, I don't necessarily think that we need to overreact over Mason Murphy's one play just yet. But either way, I do think that Cortland Ford will probably be healthy. I think he's healthy enough to play right now. I think he'll probably be healthy enough to go in regardless if the game's close or not later on. And we haven't heard anything about Haskins' injury being too serious either.
So everybody talks about the defense this, defense that, whether it's Sua Cravens or whoever, I keep talking about the defense. So when you have these big leads, you're going to give up yards in some capacity. And then what happens is when you have a big lead, you think the other team's going to pass. And then all of a sudden the quarterback is looking at the light box and seeing a bunch of DBs on the field, and they hand it off. And then everybody says, "Oh my God, look what happens! Look what happened! They're running the football. They're running the ball over USC." Whenever the USC had to stop the run in these 3 games, whether it's a fourth down or whatever, third and short, they've done it. Like, I mean, I think that's one thing people keep forgetting about it. I'm like, they're gonna give up some yards, but like, when they really needed to play, Alex Grinch's defense has come through, and they usually come through with a turnover or a big stop, and deflection or something like that.
Oh, no question. Now it's kind of 3 straight games doing that. So it's not necessarily all too fluky right now. And, I think back, it's funny, during the Stanford game, I thought back to what you had been telling me in the offseason. You were saying, week 2, look at week 2. You got David Shaw, who knows how to game plan against USC. He's a coach that likes to run the ball. He knows how to run the ball against USC. And then, USC kind of doesn't necessarily have the best second half. They only score 6 points and they give up 14 points. But I'm thinking about it, David Shaw was supposed to be able to move the ball on USC. He brought up a completely new offense just for USC. He knows how to game plan best against USC and really any Pac-12 team trying to play spoiler against them than anyone in the country. David Shaw's entire identity is to run the rock and to, kind of give you those big body blows, the kind of body blow theory type thing, to kind of wear you down as the game goes on. That's his whole thing, the trench play, wear you down as the game goes on, wear the offense down, wear the defense down. So I'm looking at it and I'm saying he brought up a whole new offense. USC still only gave up 28 points. Stanford was never in the game ever. I'm looking at a defense that I actually think may not have the best numbers. They're giving up 380 yards a game, but when it comes to making timely plays, like you said, they seem to make them, and at least make them enough to the point where they never let anyone actually get into the ballgame.
Yeah. And this kind of reminds me of when the Colts played with Peyton Manning and the year they had when they won the Super Bowl. And I'm not saying USC is going to win the whole thing, but I'm just saying, like, they had an offense that was so deadly that when you got behind, you had to scrap you had to scrap what you got. You had to scrap all that stuff you were trying to do. Yeah, they might give them a big play in a running game here, but it's personnel. Like, they're not going to be in a bare front when they're up by 21 points. Like, nobody would do that. So they're going to be in a lighter box. I think there's times where the Trojans could get a little bit more pressure on the quarterback from the front 4. I think that's fair. But I mean, at the end of the day, like, when they did blitz, they got burned with it. So I mean, at that time, I wasn't a fan of that blitz. I felt the play they just rush 4, play back. You got a big lead. Don't give them a big play. But I mean, at some point that gets boring playing defense. I think they've played very well, and I think after a while, like, they put a lot of pressure on you to be very. Not very, I just say it, they put pressure on you to the point where you have to be perfect offensively, and that's hard to do because if you sit there and try to be perfect offensively, you're going to turn the ball over at some point. And they've been very opportunistic getting these turnovers. And when they've had to have them, they got them.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the turnovers are certainly there, still, not four like we did each of the first two games. We had a couple yesterday. And it's funny, like going back to what you're saying about, how everyone's saying, oh, well, we can't stop the run when we're up by, 30 or whatever, and they're just dropping a run in there. I mean, you're exactly right, because think about it, like Jake Haener actually played worse than Logan Fife did. Yep. Logan Fife was actually much more efficient. Logan Fife was just kind of taking what the defense was giving him. And the defense was not necessarily trying to give him so little. They weren't trying to be as aggressive as the game went on. When you have a backup quarterback in there, and you've already shut down the starting quarterback, who's the best player on their team, which USC did, by the way. So, yeah, you're going to kind of give up some dink and dunk plays. Unfortunately, there's going to be a lot of green grass right in front of the players when they get the ball on the pass or whether they're running. It's a different kind of defense. And the fact that USC only gave up 7 points that entire second half, I think absolutely meant something, because that was truly garbage time. At least after Jake Haener got hurt and then we scored 5 plays later, that was at least when it was an 18-point game, whatever. At that point, it's garbage time. It was basically garbage time really in the entire second half. I thought USC bear down did a good job in that sense.
I would say one thing too is that Alex Grinch has this stranglehold on this defense too. I don't know if you saw this in the game, but when they were driving for that kind of that garbage touchdown, they showed a shot of him ripping into the defense, and they had I think they had a first and goal inside the 5-yard line, and they didn't. It was almost like that. Remember the Titans? I don't want to see him get another yard. Like, I mean, and they didn't get into the end zone, and you saw the elation of him and elation of the team. And at that time, what's the difference between 45-24? For him as a defensive coordinator, it meant a lot. And those players knew that it meant a lot. And they made sure they stopped Fresno State from getting that garbage touchdown later in that game.
Oh, no question. I think that he kind of does have a little bit of that kind of strong cultural element that he's trying to kind of instill in this program, and look at Alex Grinch, he's been in some strong cultures, he's been in, with that Ohio State team, for instance, they were big on discipline, right? Obviously, Urban Meyer had his kind of off the field stuff, so not the best culture in general, but when it came to discipline, that team was there. And what I liked about this week was that, in garbage time last week, what did we do? We had like 10 pass interference calls. Now, half of them weren't really pass interference calls, but in the Pac-12, those are, pass interferences. This week, we didn't have like any down the stretch. That was not the story of the defense in the second half at all. The story of the defense was that they, like you said, kept making plays when they needed to. They did force a couple of turnovers. And then on that last drive with that first and goal within the 5 or whatever, a bunch of guys just, kind of just stepped up, kind of just turned into men right there. And just absolutely, not only prevented Fresno State from getting a push on that last series, but also made a pretty hard hit, to kind of prevent, I forgot who it was trying to score in the end zone on that last play. And really the entire series, they looked really physical, looked really aggressive. And I like seeing that kind of late in the game when it didn't necessarily matter. But like you said, it mattered to Alex Grinch and the guys out there.
Yeah, no question about it. Let's leave USC for 1 second. Thoughts about Herm Edwards being let go? He got let go from ASU.
Yeah, I mean, he's a horrible coach, honestly. I used to cover the Sun Devils. I went to ASU. I covered them for Sports Illustrated. I've never been a big Herm Edwards guy. It was an awful hire when it happened. Then you saw him go 7-5 the first year when they went 7-5 the year before and fired Todd Graham like they should have. And then everyone's like, oh, all aboard the Herm train. It's like, well, what Herm train? They didn't go anywhere. They stayed the same team. And next year, 7-5 again. The next year they're 2-2, and I'm hearing, oh, well, they got all this potential. It's like they choked the game against USC that year. They choked the game against UCLA that year. It was bad. Those were not good losses to have.
Yeah.
They mortgaged their entire future for last season where they went 8-4. And then, I'm hearing about Herm Edwards cheating and doing all this, illegal recruiting stuff. And that was, people say, oh, everyone illegally recruits. But in Herm Edwards' case, he was doing it during the global pandemic, bringing in recruits, sacrificing health of recruits and the staff and the people around the program when no one else in the Pac-12 was doing it because it was a global pandemic. It was a big deal.
Yeah.
And you look, they only played 3 games that year or 4 games, whatever it was, when everyone else in the country played more because they had so many games canceled to COVID. And you're looking at it and you're saying, well, yeah, this is the program that's bringing recruits in when they're not supposed to, not only for recruiting violation reasons, but also for COVID violation reasons. So I felt like he was selfish. Thought he was incredibly overrated in terms of his character. Everyone talked about his character, and I mean the results weren't there. He was a very bad football coach, and hopefully for the alums like myself, they kind of are able to kind of bring someone in who can kind of get ASU back on track. But right now it's just not looking too good there with them losing the FCS team. And thankfully for me though, I have USC playing really well, so not too.
No, Shabby, right? You talked about David Shaw. I used to think he was a good coach, and I think that the thing that I think this week and last week when I was thinking about Stanford, I was like, when you're in a spot where you're so comfortable that nobody cares whether or not you nobody cares whether you win or lose. That's not a great spot to be in. I mean, he could go. Like these guys will wax poetic about David Shaw, even if he goes 5 and even if he goes 4-5. Like what I mean, he's been horrible. He's been horrible this whole situation. What are your thoughts about David Shaw and I just feel like at some point Stanford has to either blank or get off the pot if they're going to really be a big time football team.
Well, actually, I like the way you're putting it because, when it comes to David Shaw, like, at the beginning of his tenure, he was obviously very good. He used to be, a very good coach, but, he's definitely past his prime at this point. He's not really that guy who can kind of do more with less like he used to and, kind of be, not even second or third fiddle in terms of recruits and getting in the Pac-12, getting guys to come to Stanford. And he's got those, those tough academic standards he's dealing with. And, he used to be a guy that would kind of elevate above that, kind of lead Stanford to some pretty good seasons, maybe not great, but good seasons. And, I thought that he had a really good team in 2015. That team was they finished in the top 5. They won the Pac-12 that year, but, we haven't really seen those kind of runs that he used to go on, anymore. Yeah. We've seen the upsets. Yeah. You still got to respect him. But like you said, it's tough when he's clearly past his prime, yet Stanford has no kind of interest in getting rid of him because they don't know who they can get better. They like him a lot. And for understandable reasons, Stanford is a horrible football history, and he had some very good years there. But it's just, it's a tough situation, like you said, because there's no accountability for him.
No,
he's not really changing much.
Yeah, it's like me as a Raider fan. There's no accountability for Derek Carr. He just keeps losing. There's no accountability there. Well, 2 more things. Notre Dame, is this head coach you think going to make it through this first year? Because this is looking. I mean, I almost can't wait to play them. They just look really bad.
Well, I think he'll make it through the first year because I feel like they kind of have to have him make it through the first year because, man, that would be a PR nightmare if they had to fire him within a year. And I don't, these ADs have a lot of pride. They don't want to accept that they were wrong that fast. But, I mean, I definitely at this point don't expect him to stay for the long haul. And it sucks to say it after 3 games, but it's nice to say it after 3 games. I hate Notre Dame, but it's tough to come to that conclusion, as an analyst. But the reality is I thought it was an overrated hire from the start. I mean, I'm looking at his resume. He was a coordinator for Notre Dame. He was a good coordinator. He was a good coordinator for Cincinnati. But I'm hearing, he's a great guy. Well, he's a great guy. That's nice and all that. Yeah. But you and I are too, and we're not football coaches. It doesn't really matter if you're a great guy. You got to coach football. And you got to be good at it.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
You're hiring a guy that's he's not even that old, and neither is Lincoln Riley. So that's not only it, but I'm saying he's not even that experienced in what he's doing. And he hasn't been a head coach anywhere before. And now you're expecting him to be the head coach in Notre Dame that should be competing for national championships. They're one of the most prestigious programs ever. So I didn't understand the hire from the start, really. Yeah,
and then last thing, what worries you about going to Corvallis here this week? I mean, I thought last week was kind of cool that Oregon State played Fresno, so I could just scout both teams at the same time. But I've obviously, Nolan Chance at quarterback, Luke Musgrave is a good tight end. They are going to be, even though they only can use because of construction, they only can use like half the stadium. It still should be pretty loud over there.
No, yeah, I would say the thing I'm worried about is actually not necessarily USC, but just, their history in spoiling USC in Corvallis. They've done it before, obviously, famously that Sanchez team, and, you're looking back at that team at the end of the season, you're like, oh, this team is so good. How's this team now in the national championship? And you remember, well, there was Corvallis, you know?
Yes.
And, so I think really it's just going to come down to mentality. That worries me in the sense that, you know, USC's kind of had a little easy so far. You know, Oregon State's kind of had to earn everything, you know, they weren't really given much when you're playing for Oregon State.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, this is going to be USC's last time coming up to Corvallis as a member of the Pac-12. And, you know, I definitely think that there's going to be a little bit of extra juice there. And, you know, that they've got some guys, and these are all West Coast guys, you know, and I definitely think there's going to be a lot of pride from that other sideline. It's just going to be up to USC to be disciplined, have a strong culture, and kind of match that.
And I would say the only thing for me is like the weather. Weather can be unpredictable up there as well. The only loss that USC can have, if you're thinking about playoff possibility, would be Utah. I mean, it would be Utah. I mean, they can't really, because I mean, if they win this, and then obviously if they lose this game and they beat Utah, then who cares what happened? Who cares what happened on Corvallis? But I think they have to go gear up and just get ready for Utah. And this is, I mean, they're good. This is a good team, but I do think USC finds a way to beat the Beavers as far as that goes. All right, Evan, man. Anything you got coming up this week, writing wise, that you want to get people excited about?
Well, no, just a lot of kind of fallout stuff from the game, you know, some stuff on the running game, like we talked about, things that really kind of stood out to other people, you know, and then, you know, hopefully later in the week, obviously some stuff preparing for the Oregon State game, and, you know, kind of taking a look at what we bring to the table, taking a look at what they bring to the table, and, you know, kind of preparing you guys for what should be a really good Saturday.
Yeah, it should be fun. Should be fun. The Saturdays are definitely a lot better with the way USC is playing football right now. All right, Evan, thank you. We'll take a quick break, and then I'll come back and get some finishing thoughts, and then we'll thank you again for coming on.
Thank you, my man.
Take care, brother. All right, we're back on the Student Body Right USC podcast. I want to thank Evan Desai from Reign of Troy. He's a really good writer, good follow for USC. You know, a passionate writer about the Trojans and touch it like it is. So if they're not playing well, they're not playing well, and then when they are playing well, he gives you some really good analysis as far as that goes. So USC, you know, 45-17, just really another really fantastic performance for the most part. They had some. This team, you know, they were feisty early. This is a really good program. Don't get this twisted. I know they're 1-2 right now, and for them, they lost their quarterback in this game. So, you know, that's tough, but I thought Fife came in and played pretty well. He's a top recruit as well. So Hainer he might have played his last game or one of his last games there at Fresno State, but I just thought USC did a great job. They're going to get leads in games. When they get leads in games, they're going to have, 4 down linemen, and the box is going to be light because they have to protect against the pass. You can't give up big pass plays. So that's why you see some of these reverses. That's why you see some of these plays that go for a big yardage because of the personnel. Now, do they change that up? I mean, are you really going to come out in a run stopping front when you have a 3-score lead? No, that's not going to happen, right? You're probably not going to be doing that. So when they needed to get a stop, bottom line, when USC needed to get a stop, they got one. It's really that simple. They got one. So they get turnovers. They do all those things. They're not perfect. I think the recruits in the next couple of years will be the guys who can shut down the run and get the pass rush that everybody wants. I understand that's important. So, but right now we'll have to wait and see on that. But I do like the fact that they're just finding ways to win games and win games pretty handily. And a defense, this offense puts so much pressure on you because not many teams are geared up to play at the pace USC is, where they can score over 40 points a game and still and be efficient in that. It's hard to do it because they can do it from running the football. I mean, this game they had 100 yards. Austin Jones. I'm sorry, Austin Davis. Sorry, Austin Jones had 12 carries for 110 yards. Travis Dye had 11 carries for 110 yards. I mean, it's hard to beat that. It's hard to beat that. I would say a couple of things. Caleb Williams have to learn how to slide because he is going to get hurt if he keeps doing what he's doing. So just learn how to slide or get out of bounds. He doesn't have to be. We know you're tough. We don't need you to take on tacklers all the time. As far as that goes, so he's played as exceptionally well, and I just think Jordan Addison just gives them that, like Evan said, the guy who the offense can run through. That's a huge thing to be able to do, and they've done it at a high level. I mean, they are really a dynamic offensive team. I thought going into the season that Jordan Addison was overkill. Now I don't think they might not even be 3-0 if it wasn't for Jordan Addison and that connection he has with Caleb Williams. All right, later in the week we will have a breakdown of the offense, and I'll give you some Caleb Williams stuff, give you some Jordan Addison stuff, and give you something I like about this defense. On the next episode of the Student Body Right USC podcast. Remember, at PORSBR. That's POR at PORSBR on Twitter. If you're looking for some stuff there as well too. And for Raider fans, hey, this is what happens. We'll Ryan. We'll talk. Ryan will meet up when Ryan Holmes gets back from the game. We'll talk about the Raiders' incredible loss. It's just an absolutely incredible loss to the Arizona Cardinals. All right, peace. And fight on.